Welcome to Her True Stories, where we share the most powerful journeys of women who refuse to be silenced. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us amplify voices that need to be heard. My name is Layla Mackenzie, and at 74 years old, I thought I'd seen every form of betrayal life could offer. I'd buried a husband, survived cancer, and raised 3 children through their darkest moments. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my youngest son, Marcus, showed me exactly how little I meant to him. It was a Tuesday evening in November, the kind of crisp autumn night that made my arthritic hands ache. I was sitting at Marcus's granite kitchen island, watching my granddaughter Sophie, age 8, work on her math homework while my grandson Tyler, 10, played video games in the adjacent family room. The house smelled like the expensive candles Marcus's wife, Jennifer, always burned. Vanilla and bergamot, scents that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Marcus was at the stove, stirring what he called his famous marinara sauce, though I recognized it as the same recipe I'd taught him when he was 12. Jennifer was upstairs, allegedly on a work call that had conveniently stretched through dinner preparation and would likely extend through cleanup. The scene was picture-perfect: successful son, beautiful home, adorable grandchildren. Everything I'd worked 74 years to help create. So, why did I feel like a stranger in this kitchen? "Grandma Layla," Sophie said, looking up from her worksheet with those earnest blue eyes that reminded me so much of Marcus at that age, "can you help me with this word problem?" "Of course, sweetheart." I slid my reading glasses down my nose and examined the page. A train leaves Chicago at 3 p.m. traveling at 65 miles per hour. As I helped Sophie work through the problem, my mind wandered to the stack of unopened mail I'd seen on the counter earlier. Bills, mostly, but also what looked like bank statements. My bank statements. The ones that used to come to my apartment before Marcus had insisted I move in with them for my own safety 6 months ago. I'd been grateful at the time. After Harold's death 3 years earlier, the loneliness had become suffocating. When Marcus suggested I sell my condo and move into their spacious guest suite, it seemed like a blessing. "We want you close, Mom," he'd said, his arm around my shoulders. "Families should stick together." But lately, something felt wrong. My Social Security checks were being direct deposited into an account I couldn't access. My pension payments were being managed by Marcus. Even my small savings account from Harold's life insurance had somehow been transferred to what Marcus called a family trust for tax purposes. I'd tried asking about it before, but Marcus always had explanations that made me feel foolish for questioning him. "Mom, you don't need to worry about money anymore. I'm handling everything." Or, "The financial world is complicated now. Let me protect you from all that stress." But tonight, watching him cook with ingredients that probably cost more than my old weekly budget, I felt something shift inside me. A question that had been growing for months finally demanded to be asked. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice casual as Sophie finished her homework, "I was wondering if I could see the statements for my accounts. I'd just like to know how things are looking." The stirring stopped. The kitchen went quiet except for the sound of Tyler's video game in the next room. Marcus turned slowly, his face wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder. "What did you just say?" "I just asked about my financial statements. I'd like to see." "Don't." His voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't ever question me about money, Mom. I am handling your finances because you can't. I am the man of this family now, and you will not question my decisions." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sophie looked up from her homework, her eyes wide with confusion. Tyler's game sounds seemed to grow louder in the sudden silence. "Marcus, I wasn't questioning your decisions. I just wanted to." "You just wanted to what? Second-guess me? Undermine my authority in my own house." He stepped closer, towering over where I sat. I took you in when no one else would. I'm managing your money because you're too old to understand how things work now. And you will not disrespect me by questioning my judgment. I stared at this man who looked like my son but sounded like a stranger. The boy I'd rocked through nightmares, taught to ride a bike, put through college by working double shifts at the hospital. That boy had vanished, replaced by someone who spoke to me like I was a burden rather than his mother. I understand, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I won't ask again. Good. Marcus turned back to the stove, his posture radiating satisfaction. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. I helped Sophie pack up her homework, my movements automatic while my mind reeled. As I watched my granddaughter's innocent face, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. She was learning that this was how men spoke to women. That this was normal. That questioning a man's authority, even about your own money, was disrespectful. That night, lying in the guest bedroom that had once felt like sanctuary but now felt like a cage, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let this stand. I wasn't going to model submission for my granddaughter or teach my grandson that financial bullying was acceptable. Marcus thought he was dealing with a helpless old woman who could be intimidated into silence. He was about to discover exactly how wrong he was. The next morning, I woke before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The house was silent. Marcus and Jennifer wouldn't be up for another hour, and the children were still sleeping. I made my way to the kitchen and started coffee, my movements careful and deliberate. As the coffee brewed, I thought about the woman I used to be. For 37 years, I'd worked as a registered nurse at Portland General Hospital. I'd managed my own finances, owned my own home, raised 3 children largely on my own after their father decided family life was too restrictive. I'd been competent, independent, respected. When had I become this timid creature who accepted financial imprisonment without protest? The answer came with painful clarity, gradually, with each small surrender disguised as help. First, Marcus had offered to streamline my bill paying by setting up automatic transfers. Then he'd suggested consolidating my accounts for simplicity. Each step had been presented as a kindness, a way to reduce my stress and make my life easier. But now I saw the pattern. Like a frog in slowly boiling water, I'd been cooked so gradually I hadn't noticed until it was almost too late. Almost. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly busied myself with breakfast preparation. Jennifer appeared first, dressed in her usual armor of designer workout clothes and perfectly applied makeup, even at 6 a.m. "Morning, Layla," she said with the kind of bright smile that never reached her eyes. "You're up early." "Old habits," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Coffee's ready." Jennifer poured herself a cup in a travel mug and gathered her gym bag. "I'll be at Pilates until 9, then I have a client meeting. Can you handle getting the kids ready for school?" "Of course." "Great." "Oh, and Marcus mentioned you had some questions about finances last night." Her tone was casual, but I caught the underlying sharpness. "He's handling everything perfectly, you know. You don't need to worry your head about such things." There it was again, the dismissal, the infantilization. As if asking about my own money was beyond my capabilities. "You're right," I said with a smile that matched hers for insincerity. I don't know what I was thinking. After Jennifer left, I helped Sophie and Tyler get ready for school, listening to their chatter about friends and assignments while my mind worked on a different problem entirely. As I braided Sophie's hair, I made mental notes about everything I'd need to do. First, I needed to understand exactly what Marcus had done with my finances. Second, I needed to document everything. Third, I needed help from someone who couldn't be intimidated or bought off. Marcus appeared just as the school bus arrived, dressed in his expensive suit and projecting the confidence of a man who believed his authority was unquestionable. Kids have everything they need? He asked, not looking at me directly.
Yes.
Lunch money, permission slips, homework. He nodded curtly. I'll be late tonight. Client dinner. He grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door, then paused. Mom, I hope you understand that what happened last night was for your own good. I know it's hard to accept help, but that's what family does. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired its effectiveness. He was reframing his financial control and verbal abuse as loving care, making me the ungrateful recipient rather than the victim. I understand perfectly, I said, meeting his eyes with a calm I didn't feel. You're protecting me. Exactly. His smile was patronizing. I knew you'd come around. After everyone left, I stood in the kitchen surrounded by the detritus of family life. Coffee cups, cereal bowls, the lingering scent of Jennifer's expensive perfume. The house felt different in the silence, less like a home and more like a beautiful prison. I walked to Marcus's home office, a shrine to his success with its mahogany desk, leather chairs, and wall of awards. The door was always locked when he wasn't home, but I'd watched him enter the code enough times to memorize it. 0824, Sophie's birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was using his daughter's birthday to protect secrets from his mother. The office revealed exactly what I'd expected and feared. Filed neatly in a cabinet were statements for accounts I didn't even know existed. My Social Security payments, my pension, the life insurance money from Harold, all of it flowing into accounts bearing Marcus's name alongside mine. But it was the computer that revealed the true scope of his control. Using a password I found written on a sticky note, another birthday, Tyler's this time, I accessed spreadsheets that tracked every penny of my money with meticulous detail. Car payments for the Mercedes in the driveway. Private school tuition for the children. The mortgage on this house. Vacation expenses. Jennifer's shopping habits. My money was funding a lifestyle I could never afford, while I was given an allowance that barely covered my basic needs. But the real kicker was the life insurance policy he'd taken out on me 6 months ago. $200,000, with Marcus as the sole beneficiary. The premium payments were coming from my own accounts. I stared at that document for a long time, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just financial abuse. This was planning. Marcus wasn't just stealing from me. He was betting on my death. I photographed everything with my old flip phone, the one Marcus hadn't replaced yet because he assumed I was too technologically incompetent to use it effectively. Then I carefully returned everything to its original position and locked the office door behind me. As I made my way back to the kitchen, I passed the mirror in the hallway and stopped. The woman looking back at me was older than I felt, her gray hair neat but unremarkable, her clothes practical rather than stylish. She looked like someone who could be easily dismissed, easily controlled.
Perfect.
Marcus had made the classic mistake of every abuser. He'd underestimated his victim. He saw an elderly woman who needed care and protection. What he missed was the nurse who'd handled medical emergencies for nearly 4 decades, who'd balanced budgets and made life-or-death decisions under pressure. The helpless old lady was about to disappear. In her place would be someone Marcus had never met. Layla Mackenzie, the woman who'd survived everything life had thrown at her and was now fighting for her granddaughter's future. The war had begun. He just didn't know it yet. 3 days after my discovery in Marcus's office, I walked into the downtown branch of First National Bank carrying my original Social Security card, Harold's death certificate, and 47 years of institutional patience. The young teller, barely older than Tyler, looked at my request with the kind of polite confusion reserved for elderly customers who clearly didn't understand modern banking. Ma'am, I show that all your accounts have authorized user access for Marcus Mackenzie. If you need account information, he'll need to. I'm not an authorized user on my own accounts, I interrupted gently. I'm the primary account holder. Marcus is the authorized user. There's a difference. The distinction seemed to confuse her further, so I asked to speak with the manager. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from David Chen, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who dealt with complex family financial situations before. Mrs. Mackenzie, I can see why you're concerned. Your son has broad access to your accounts, including the ability to make transfers and withdrawals. When was this arrangement established? I explained the timeline, how Marcus had gradually taken control, always with reasonable explanations, always presented as temporary help during my transition to widowhood. Mr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. It's not uncommon for adult children to help aging parents with finances. But you're absolutely entitled to monitor your own accounts and make changes if you're uncomfortable with the current arrangement. What would I need to do to regain full control? That depends on how the authorizations were set up. If they were temporary or revocable, you can remove them today. If they involve power of attorney documents or joint ownership changes, it's more complex. He pulled up my account details on his computer, frowning slightly. I see several significant changes made to your accounts over the past 6 months. Some of these would have required your signature. I'd like copies of all documents I've signed, please. Of course. Give me a few minutes to pull everything from your file. What he brought back made my blood run cold. Mixed in with legitimate paperwork were documents I'd never seen before, power of attorney forms, account modification requests, beneficiary changes, all bearing what appeared to be my signature. Mr. Chen, I said carefully, I need you to look at these signatures very closely. Do they all look the same to you? He examined them with growing concern. Mrs. Mackenzie, are you suggesting that some of these documents weren't signed by you? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you directly. I have never seen half of these documents before today. The implications hung heavy in the air between us. Document forgery was a serious crime, especially when it involved elderly financial abuse. What would you like me to do? Mr. Chen asked quietly. I want to remove Marcus's access to all my accounts, effective immediately. I want new account numbers. And I want copies of everything from my attorney. You have an attorney? I will by tomorrow. Mr. Chen spent the next hour walking me through the process of reclaiming my financial independence. New accounts, new passwords, new security questions. A safe deposit box that only I could access. Emergency contacts that didn't include Marcus. As I walked out of the bank 2 hours later, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. My money was mine again. Marcus would discover this when his next automatic transfer failed, probably in a few days. I was counting on his reaction to be explosive. Angry people make mistakes, and I needed Marcus to make some very big ones. My next stop was the law office of Patricia Williams, a woman I'd found through the State Bar Association's Elder Law Directory. Ms. Williams specialized in exactly the kind of case I was building, family financial abuse with elements of fraud and exploitation. Her office was modest but professional, decorated with certificates and awards that spoke to both competence and compassion. Ms. Williams herself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with sharp eyes and the kind of direct manner I appreciated. Mrs. Mackenzie, tell me about your situation. I laid out everything methodically, the gradual financial takeover, the forged documents, the life insurance policy, Marcus's threats when I'd asked questions. Ms. Williams took notes and asked pointed questions, her expression growing more serious as I continued. How much money are we talking about? My Social Security and pension combined are about $3,400 per month. The life insurance from my husband was $150,000, most of which Marcus has moved into accounts I can't access. There's also about $75,000 in savings that was originally mine. So roughly $225,000 plus ongoing monthly income. In legal terms, that constitutes substantial financial abuse. She leaned forward. Mrs. Mackenzie, what outcome are you hoping for? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? 6 months ago, I would have said I just wanted my family back, wanted to resolve this quietly and preserve relationships. But that was before Marcus had shown me who he really was. Before I'd realized what he was teaching my grandchildren about power and respect. Before I'd seen my own death reduced to a line item in his financial planning. I want him prosecuted, I said, the words coming out stronger than I'd expected. I want every penny back with interest. And I want a legal record of what he did so he can never do this to anyone else. Ms. Williams smiled for the first time since I'd entered her office. Then let's build a case that ensures all of that happens. We spent another hour going over evidence, planning strategy, and discussing the likely timeline for both civil and criminal proceedings. When I left her office, I had clear instructions. Document everything, don't confront Marcus directly, and wait for his reaction to losing access to my accounts. That evening, I cooked dinner as usual, helped the children with homework, and made polite conversation with Jennifer about her day. Marcus came home late, as promised, claiming his client dinner had run long. He seemed relaxed, confident, completely unaware that the foundation of his financial house of cards was already crumbling. He kissed Jennifer hello, ruffled Tyler's hair, and asked me how my day had been. Quiet, I said with perfect honesty. Just a few errands.
Good.
I'm glad you're keeping busy. If only he knew exactly how busy I'd been. Tomorrow, when the bank transfers failed and the account access was denied, he'd start to understand. But by then, it would be far too late to stop what I'd set in motion. I watched him scroll through his phone over dinner, probably checking account balances and planning his next moves with my money. He had no idea that every transaction was now being monitored, every attempted access documented, every move he made building the case against him. The predator had become the prey. He just hadn't realized it yet. It took exactly 36 hours for Marcus to discover what I'd done. I was in the kitchen Thursday morning, packing lunches for the children, when his roar of fury echoed through the house. What the hell did you do? I continued spreading peanut butter on bread, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The children looked up from their breakfast, alarmed by their father's tone.
Daddy.
Sophie's voice was small, uncertain. It's okay, sweetheart, I said calmly. Daddy's just frustrated about work. Finish your cereal. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face red with rage, still wearing his pajamas. In his hand was his phone, presumably showing him the failed transfer notifications and account access denials. You closed the accounts. His voice was dangerously quiet now, the kind of controlled fury that scared me more than his shouting. I reorganized my financial arrangements, I replied, not looking up from the sandwiches. Just like you've been doing for the past 6 months. Those accounts were set up for your protection. Were they? Or were they set up so you could pay for your Mercedes with my Social Security money? The children had gone completely silent, sensing the electricity in the air. Jennifer appeared on the stairs, drawn by the tension. What's going on? She asked, though her carefully neutral tone suggested she knew exactly what was happening. Your mother-in-law has lost her mind, Marcus said, his voice rising again. She's undone months of careful financial planning because she doesn't understand. I understand perfectly. I turned to face him, still holding the butter knife. I understand that you forged my signature on power of attorney documents. I understand that you took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge. I understand that you've been using my money to fund a lifestyle you can't afford. The kitchen went dead silent. Even Tyler's video game had stopped beeping. Marcus's face went through several color changes before settling on a shade of white that suggested he was beginning to grasp the scope of what I knew. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't I? Should we call the bank and ask them about the signature analysis they're conducting on the documents in my file? Or would you prefer to explain to the children why Grandma's death is worth $200,000 to you? Jennifer gasped. Sophie started crying. Tyler just stared at his father with a kind of confusion that breaks a grandmother's heart. Kids, go get ready for school, Jennifer said quickly.
Now.
They fled the kitchen, Sophie still sobbing, Tyler casting worried glances over his shoulder. Marcus waited until they were gone, then stepped closer to me, his posture threatening. You have no idea what you've done. No idea what kind of trouble you've caused for this family. I haven't caused any trouble, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. I've simply stopped allowing you to steal from me. I never stole anything. I was managing your money because you're too old and confused to notice that my Social Security checks were paying your car payment, to realize that my husband's life insurance money was funding your children's private school tuition. I set down the knife and faced him fully. I may be old, Marcus, but I'm not stupid, and I'm not confused.
I'm angry.
Something in my tone must have penetrated his rage because he stepped back slightly. Mom, listen to me. You're making a mistake. I can fix this, but you have to trust me. The way I trusted you when you told me you were just streamlining my accounts? The way I trusted you when you said the power of attorney was temporary? The way I trusted you when you promised you were protecting me? He opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. I trusted you because you're my son. Because I thought the boy I raised to be honest and honorable was still in there somewhere. But that boy is gone, isn't he? Replaced by a man who sees his elderly mother as a piggy bank and his own children as beneficiaries of theft. It's not theft when it's family. It's especially theft when it's family. My voice rose for the first time. It's betrayal and exploitation and abuse, all wrapped up in the lie that you were helping me. Marcus looked around the kitchen desperately, as if searching for allies or weapons. Jennifer, tell her. Tell her how we've been taking care of her, making sure she has everything she needs. But Jennifer was backing away, her face pale. Marcus, did you really forge her signature? Did you really take out life insurance without telling her? The look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. Jennifer had known about some of it, maybe not the forgery, but certainly the financial manipulation. She'd been a willing beneficiary of my stolen money. This conversation is over, Marcus said abruptly. Mom, you're going to call the bank today and fix this mess, or what? I interrupted. You'll throw me out? Please do. I'd love to explain to your neighbors why I'm suddenly homeless after living here for 6 months. You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional, confused. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. I picked up my purse from the counter. In fact, I'm thinking so clearly that I've already retained an attorney. Patricia Williams, if you'd like to call her. She specializes in elder financial abuse. The blood drained from Marcus's face completely. You hired a lawyer? I hired a lawyer who's very interested in the forged documents in my bank file. She's also quite curious about the life insurance policy and the pattern of financial exploitation. I smiled pleasantly. She thinks we have an excellent case for both criminal charges and civil recovery. You wouldn't. His voice was barely a whisper. I already have. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? You might want to start looking for alternative funding for your lifestyle. Because as of yesterday, the Layla Mackenzie piggy bank is permanently closed. I walked out of the house I'd called home for 6 months, leaving behind the sound of Marcus and Jennifer arguing in frantic whispers. I didn't have anywhere specific to go, but that didn't matter. For the first time since moving in with them, I was exactly where I wanted to be, in control of my own life. The real battle was just beginning, but I'd already won the most important victory. I'd stopped being a victim and started being a prosecutor. Marcus was about to learn that the gentle old lady who'd raised him was gone. In her place was someone much more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain from seeing justice done. I spent that first night of freedom in a modest hotel downtown, surrounded by legal documents and bank statements spread across the queen-sized bed like pieces of a complex puzzle. Each document told part of the story of my financial destruction, but together they painted a picture of systematic, calculated abuse that went far beyond what I'd initially discovered. Patricia Williams had given me homework: create a complete timeline of every financial change since Harold's death, document every conversation I could remember about money, and gather any physical evidence of Marcus's deception. The timeline was damning. Within 2 weeks of Harold's funeral, Marcus had begun his campaign. First, offering to help with the insurance paperwork, then suggesting we simplify my banking to reduce stress during my grieving period. Each step had been presented as temporary relief that somehow became permanent control. But it was the conversations I remembered that revealed the true psychology of his manipulation. Marcus had been grooming me for financial abuse the same way predators groom their victims, through false kindness, manufactured dependency, and gradual isolation from anyone who might question his actions. My phone rang at 8 a.m. Marcus, of course. Mom, we need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me for coffee. Please. The please was new. Yesterday's rage had been replaced by something that sounded almost like desperation. Where? That place you like on Morrison Street. I agreed, curious to see which version of Marcus would show up, the furious tyrant or the concerned son. Café Luna was crowded with the morning rush, providing plenty of witnesses and background noise. Marcus was already there when I arrived, hunched over a coffee cup like a man carrying the weight of the world. He looked up as I approached, and I was shocked by how much he'd aged in 24 hours. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually perfect hair disheveled. This was not a man sleeping well. Mom, thank God you came. I said I'd be here. I ordered tea from the barista and joined him at the small table. What did you want to discuss? I want to fix this. All of it. He leaned forward intensely. I know I made mistakes, okay? I know I got too involved in your finances. But we can work this out, can't we? Families should solve problems together. What mistakes do you think you made, Marcus? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He'd clearly prepared an apology script, but not for specific accountability. I should have consulted with you more. Should have explained things better. Maybe I was too protective, too controlling. He reached across the table as if to take my hand, but I pulled back. But Mom, hiring a lawyer? Threatening criminal charges? That's extreme. Is it? What would you call forging someone's signature on legal documents? I never forged. He stopped himself, realizing he was about to commit to a lie that could be easily disproven. Okay, maybe I signed some things when you weren't available, but only to protect you, to make sure your bills got paid on time. Which things did you sign without my knowledge? Another pause. He was clearly calculating how much I knew versus how much he could admit to. Some bank forms, maybe a few insurance documents. Nothing major. The power of attorney giving you complete control over my financial and medical decisions. Was that nothing major? His face crumpled.
You signed that.
I remember.
No, Marcus.
I remember every document I've signed since Harold died, and that wasn't one of them. I leaned back in my chair. The bank has experts analyzing the signatures. Soon we'll know exactly which documents I signed and which ones you forged. Mom, please. You're going to destroy our family over money. Over paperwork. Is that really what you want? I want my grandson to grow up knowing that financial abuse is unacceptable. I want my granddaughter to learn that questioning authority, even male authority, is not only acceptable but necessary. I met his eyes directly. And I want my son to face consequences for his actions, so he never does this to anyone else. Anyone else? Mom, this is family. This is different. It's exactly the same. Abuse is abuse, whether it happens between strangers or family members. In fact, it's worse when it's family because the victim trusts the abuser. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. When he looked up, there was something calculating in his expression that sent a chill down my spine. You know, Mom, maybe you're right. Maybe I did make some mistakes. Maybe we should get everything out in the open. I'm glad you're starting to see, including your drinking. The words hit me like a slap. My what? Your drinking problem. The reason I had to take control of your finances in the first place. His voice was calm now, almost clinical. You've been struggling with alcohol since Dad died. Jennifer and I have been covering for you, trying to help you get better, but clearly you need professional intervention. I stared at him in disbelief. Marcus, I don't drink. You know I don't drink. I haven't had alcohol since your father's funeral. That's not how I remember it. And that's not what Jennifer remembers either. In fact, we've been documenting your episodes for months, trying to decide when to stage an intervention. The audacity of it was breathtaking. In real time, I was watching him construct an alternative narrative designed to discredit me and justify his financial control. If I had a drinking problem, then of course he needed to manage my money. If I was an unreliable narrator due to addiction, then my accusations of forgery and abuse were simply the delusions of an alcoholic in denial. You're lying, I said quietly. Am I? Are you sure about that? Because alcohol affects memory, Mom. Makes people paranoid, suspicious. Makes them imagine things that never happened. He leaned forward again, his voice taking on a tone of false concern. Maybe you think I forged documents because you don't remember signing them. Maybe you think I'm stealing because you don't remember giving me permission to manage your accounts. Marcus. Maybe the best thing for everyone would be for you to check into a treatment facility. Get the help you need. Let professionals evaluate your mental state. His smile was cold. I'm sure once you're sober and thinking clearly, you'll remember things differently. I sat back, genuinely impressed by the speed and sophistication of his counterattack. In less than 5 minutes, he'd constructed a complete alternative reality that painted him as the caring son and me as the delusional addict. It was gaslighting on a professional level. That's your strategy? I asked. Claim I'm an alcoholic to explain away your financial crimes? I'm not claiming anything. I'm just suggesting that maybe your memory isn't as reliable as you think. Maybe you should consider that before you destroy our family with false accusations. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse and coat. Marcus, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I have never had a drinking problem. I remember every conversation we've had about money. And I know the difference between documents I've signed and documents that bear forged signatures. Mom, I also know that threatening to have me committed for imaginary alcoholism is another form of abuse. It's called psychological manipulation, and it's going to look very bad in court. His confident expression faltered slightly. But most importantly, I continued, I know that you just gave me something my attorney is going to love. A recorded conversation where you attempt to discredit the victim of financial abuse by manufacturing a mental health crisis. I tapped my purse, where my old flip phone had been recording our entire conversation. What the hell are you doing? What I should have done months ago. Protecting myself from my own son. I walked away from the table, leaving Marcus sitting alone with his coffee and his rapidly collapsing schemes. As I reached the door, I heard him calling after me, his voice rising above the cafe chatter. You're making a mistake, Mom. You'll regret this. Perhaps. But I doubted I'd regret it as much as Marcus was going to regret underestimating the woman who'd raised him. Patricia Williams' office at 6 a.m. Friday morning looked like a war room. Legal briefs covered every surface. 3 laptops were running simultaneously, and 2 associates were working phones to file emergency motions before the courthouse opened. "Jennifer's recordings are game-changing," Patricia said, handing me a cup of coffee. "Marcus essentially confesses to financial fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. But the conservatorship petition complicates things." "How so?" "If he can get an emergency hearing before our criminal evidence is reviewed, he might convince a judge that you're having a mental health crisis. Once you're declared incompetent, anything you've said or done can be dismissed as the product of diminished capacity." "But I've been evaluated. I have medical records," which he'll argue are outdated or irrelevant. His petition claims recent dramatic personality changes, paranoid delusions about family theft, and dangerous financial decisions. She handed me a copy of his filing. "He's also claiming you threatened suicide if you weren't allowed to control your own money." The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, that I almost admired their creativity. Marcus had constructed an alternative reality where every reasonable action I'd taken was evidence of mental illness. What's our response? Multi-pronged attack. First, we're filing an emergency motion to block the conservatorship pending a full competency evaluation by court-appointed professionals. Second, we're submitting Jennifer's recordings as evidence of bad faith in Marcus's petition. Third, we're requesting an immediate restraining order preventing him from accessing any of your financial accounts pending criminal investigation. And if we lose? Patricia's expression was grim. "If the conservatorship is approved, Marcus regains control of your finances, your medical decisions, and your living situation. He could have you institutionalized while he systematically destroys evidence of his crimes." "Then we can't lose." "We won't, but it's going to be close." The hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. in Judge Harrison's courtroom. I spent the morning being reevaluated by Dr. Rebecca Chin, a court-appointed psychiatrist who specialized in elderly competency issues. Dr. Chin was thorough, professional, and refreshingly direct. She tested my memory, my reasoning ability, my understanding of financial concepts, and my awareness of current events. After 2 hours, she sat back with a slight smile. "Mrs. Mackenzie, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your mental capacity. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning is sound, and your financial decisions, including hiring an attorney to recover stolen funds, show excellent judgment. Then why is my son claiming I'm incompetent? In my professional opinion? Because you've stopped allowing him to control you, and he's desperate to regain that control." She made notes in her file. "I've seen this pattern before in financial abuse cases. When the victim starts fighting back, the abuser often claims mental illness to discredit them. Will your evaluation stop the conservatorship?" "It should. But judges sometimes err on the side of caution when family members express concern about elderly relatives. That's why your attorney's evidence about Marcus's motivations is so important." At 1:30 p.m., I sat in the courthouse hallway with Patricia, reviewing our strategy one final time. Across the hall, Marcus sat with his attorney, an expensive-looking man in a $3,000 suit who kept checking his Rolex and looking annoyed. Marcus himself looked terrible. His usual perfect grooming was replaced by stubble and wrinkled clothes. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands shook slightly as he reviewed documents. He was a man on the edge, and everyone could see it. "Remember," Patricia whispered, "let me do the talking unless the judge asks you direct questions. If you do speak, be calm, clear, and factual. Don't let emotion show, even if Marcus's attorney tries to provoke you." Judge Harrison was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen every form of family dysfunction imaginable. She reviewed both petitions quickly, then looked up with evident skepticism. "Mr. Mackenzie, You're requesting emergency conservatorship for your mother based on claims of mental incompetence and dangerous behavior. Ms. Williams, you're opposing this petition and presenting evidence of financial elder abuse. These are serious and contradictory allegations. Marcus's attorney stood first. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of Mrs. Mackenzie's declining mental state, including paranoid accusations against family members, reckless financial decisions, and threats of self-harm. We're seeking conservatorship to protect her from her own deteriorating judgment. What evidence do you have of mental decline? Family testimony about personality changes, documentation of erratic behavior, and financial decisions that no competent person would make, such as hiring an attorney to sue her own family over imaginary theft. Judge Harrison's eyebrows rose. Imaginary theft. Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Mackenzie has fabricated elaborate conspiracy theories about her son stealing her money, when in fact he's been managing her finances at her request to protect her from her own poor judgment. I see. Ms. Williams, your response? Patricia stood with confident authority. Your Honor, we have extensive evidence that Mr. Mackenzie has systematically defrauded his mother over a period of 6 months, including forged legal documents, unauthorized account transfers, and a life insurance policy taken without her knowledge. This conservatorship petition is a desperate attempt to regain control after his victims started fighting back. That's a serious accusation. What evidence supports this claim? Bank records showing unauthorized transfers, signature analysis revealing forged documents, and recorded conversations where Mr. Mackenzie admits to his crimes. Judge Harrison looked intrigued. Recorded conversations? Patricia played 3 minutes of Jennifer's most damning recordings. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as Marcus's voice filled the air. Of course I signed some things for her. She's too confused to understand what needs to be done. The life insurance? That's just good planning. She'll never know about it unless something happens. I'm not stealing from her. I'm managing family resources. There's a difference. When the recordings ended, Marcus was white as paper. His attorney was frantically whispering in his ear, clearly trying to figure out how to respond to evidence he'd never seen before. Judge Harrison stared at Marcus for a long moment. Mr. Mackenzie, would you like to explain these recordings? Marcus's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, these recordings are taken out of context. I asked Mr. Mackenzie to explain them. Marcus rose slowly, his voice barely audible. Those conversations, they don't mean what they sound like. I was trying to protect my mother by forging her signature on legal documents. She gave me permission. Mr. Mackenzie, I'm going to stop you there before you commit perjury in my courtroom. Judge Harrison's voice was ice cold. Dr. Chun, what did your evaluation reveal about Mrs. Mackenzie's mental competency? Dr. Chun stood from the gallery. Your Honor, Mrs. Mackenzie shows no signs of mental decline, dementia, or incompetency. She's fully capable of managing her own affairs and making informed decisions about her life and finances. And her accusations about financial abuse? Based on my evaluation and review of the evidence, her accusations appear to be accurate and based on documented facts rather than paranoid delusions. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, then fixed Marcus with a stare that could have frozen fire. Mr. Mackenzie, this conservatorship petition is not only denied, it's dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation of potential elder abuse, fraud, and perjury. Marcus collapsed into his chair as if he'd been shot. Mrs. Mackenzie, the judge continued, turning to me, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing your son from accessing any of your financial accounts or attempting to exercise any authority over your affairs. I'm also ordering the immediate return of all funds taken without your explicit written consent. Your Honor, Marcus's attorney said desperately. My client. Your client just attempted to use the court system to cover up what appears to be systematic financial abuse of his elderly mother. If I were you, counselor, I'd be advising him to retain a criminal defense attorney. As we left the courthouse, Marcus tried to approach me in the hallway.
Mom, please.
I can explain everything. It doesn't have to be like this. Mr. Mackenzie, Patricia interrupted, you're in violation of the restraining order. Any contact with my client will result in immediate arrest. Marcus backed away, his face a mask of defeat and fury. But as I walked past him toward the exit, I heard him whisper something that chilled me to the bone. You haven't won anything, old woman. You have no idea what you've started. Perhaps not. But I knew what I'd finished, his ability to steal from me with impunity. Everything else was just cleanup. 3 weeks after the conservatorship hearing, Detective Maria Santos from the Elder Abuse Unit called to inform me that the district attorney had filed formal criminal charges against Marcus. 5 counts of elder financial abuse, 3 counts of forgery, 1 count of insurance fraud, and 1 count of attempted coercion of an elderly person. Mrs. Mackenzie, this is one of the most well-documented cases of family financial abuse I've seen in 15 years, Detective Santos explained during our meeting at the DA's office. Your son created a paper trail that essentially prosecutes itself. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed the unauthorized transfers. Document analysis confirmed the forged signatures. Jennifer's recordings provided direct admissions of guilt. Even Marcus's own text messages and voicemails demonstrated a pattern of intimidation and threats. What kind of sentence is he looking at? I asked. If convicted on all counts, anywhere from 5 to 15 years in state prison, plus full restitution and substantial fines.
Detetive Santos paused.
His attorney has already approached us about a plea deal. What kind of deal? Guilty plea to reduced charges, 2 years in minimum security prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution of stolen funds. In exchange, he'd avoid the felony convictions that would cost him his law license. And what do you recommend? That depends on what outcome you're hoping for. A plea deal guarantees conviction and restitution, but with lighter consequences. Going to trial risks acquittal, but could result in much harsher sentencing if we win. I thought about my grandchildren, about the man Marcus used to be, about the lessons being taught by either choice. What would happen to his family if he goes to prison for 15 years? That's not really our concern, Mrs. Mackenzie. Our job is to prosecute the crime, not manage the consequences for the criminal's family. But it's my concern. Those children are innocent victims in this.
Detective Santos nodded gratefully.
Have you discussed this with your attorney? Patricia thinks I should push for maximum charges. She says anything less sends the wrong message about financial elder abuse.
She's not wrong.
These crimes are severely underreported and underprosecuted. A high-profile case with serious consequences could deter other potential abusers. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, a modest but comfortable place I'd rented with my recovered funds, thinking about justice versus mercy. Through the window, I could see families in the courtyard below, children playing while parents watched from benches. Sophie and Tyler were living with Jennifer now, who had filed for divorce and received temporary custody. I'd been allowed supervised visits twice a week, carefully monitored to ensure I didn't poison the children against their father. The irony wasn't lost on me, the victim of abuse being supervised to protect the abuser's reputation. But the visits had been healing. Sophie, now 9, asked direct questions about what had happened. Tyler, 11, was old enough to understand the basic concept that Daddy had taken Grandma's money without permission, and that was wrong. Are you mad at Daddy? Sophie had asked during our last visit. I'm disappointed in the choices he made, I'd answered carefully. But I'll always love him because he's my son, just like you'll always love him because he's your daddy. Will he go to jail? Maybe. Sometimes when grown-ups make bad choices, they have to face consequences to learn from their mistakes. Like when I get timeout for hitting Tyler? Similar, but more serious because grown-ups are supposed to know better. She nodded solemnly, then returned to her coloring book. Children, I'd learned, were remarkably resilient when given honest information and consistent love. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Marcus's attorney, requesting a meeting. Mrs. Mackenzie, my client would like to speak with you about resolving this matter outside of court. Mr. Stevens, your client is under a restraining order. He's not allowed to contact me, which is why I'm calling. He'd like to meet in a supervised setting to discuss a settlement that might be beneficial to everyone involved. What kind of settlement? Full restitution of all funds, a formal written apology, voluntary surrender of his law license, and agreement to supervised visitation with his children only. In exchange, you'd agree to support the plea deal for reduced charges. And if I refuse? Then we go to trial. This becomes a media circus, and everyone loses, you, Marcus, and most importantly, the children. The threat was subtle but clear. Cooperate or watch your family's private pain become public entertainment. I'll discuss it with my attorney and get back to you. Patricia's response was immediate and emphatic. Absolutely not. This is exactly the kind of manipulation that allowed him to abuse you in the first place. He's using the children's welfare to pressure you into letting him off easy. But if going to trial hurts Sophie and Tyler are already hurt. The question is whether they learn that actions have consequences or that family wealth and connections can buy your way out of serious crimes. So, you think I should refuse the settlement? I think you should make the decision based on what kind of world you want your grandchildren to grow up in. One where financial abuse of elderly family members results in a slap on the wrist, or one where such crimes are taken seriously. That night, I called Jennifer to discuss the settlement offer. What do you think is best for the children? I asked. Honestly, I think they need to see their father face real consequences for what he did. Tyler is old enough to understand that stealing is wrong, and Sophie needs to learn that women don't have to accept being treated badly by men.
She paused.
But I also know that a trial will be brutal. Marcus's attorney will try to make you look like a vindictive old woman destroying a family out of spite. Can you handle that? Can the children handle it? We'll handle whatever we have to. I'm tired of protecting Marcus from the consequences of his own actions. Then we go to trial.
Good.
And Layla?
Thank you.
For fighting back, for refusing to be silenced, for showing my children what standing up for yourself looks like. After hanging up, I made one more call to Detective Santos. We're refusing the plea deal, I said. I want this to go to trial. Are you sure? Trials are unpredictable, and defense attorneys can be ruthless in their character attacks on victims. I'm sure. My grandchildren need to learn that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight is difficult. Then we'll see you in court, Mrs. Mackenzie. And I promise you, we're going to get justice. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the woman I'd been 9 months ago, grateful for family inclusion, willing to surrender independence for the illusion of security. That woman would have taken the settlement, apologized for causing trouble, and retreated back into grateful silence. But that woman was gone, transformed by betrayal into someone Marcus had never expected to face, a prosecutor in the case against him, armed with evidence and unshakable resolve. The boy I'd raised was about to face the woman he'd created through his own cruelty. And she wasn't backing down. The courtroom was packed when People versus Marcus Mackenzie began on a cold Monday morning in February. Local media had picked up the story. Elderly woman fights back against son's financial abuse, and the gallery was filled with advocates, curious observers, and other elderly victims who saw my case as a beacon of hope. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, wearing my best navy suit and the pearl necklace Harold had given me for our 40th anniversary. Patricia sat beside me, while across the aisle, Marcus hunched between his two defense attorneys like a man preparing for execution. He'd lost weight during the months leading up to trial. His expensive suits hung loose on his frame, and his usually perfect hair showed gray roots he'd stopped bothering to touch up. He looked like what he was, a man watching his entire life collapse because of his own choices. District Attorney James Morrison delivered the opening statement with the precision of a surgeon. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about trust betrayed in the most fundamental way possible. The defendant, Marcus Mackenzie, systematically stole over $200,000 from his elderly mother through forgery, fraud, and manipulation. He convinced her to move into his home, then used that trust to gain access to her finances. When she discovered his crimes and tried to protect herself, he attempted to have her declared mentally incompetent to cover up his theft. Morrison walked the jury through the evidence methodically: the forged documents, the unauthorized transfers, the life insurance policy, the recordings where Marcus admitted his crimes. By the time he finished, the basic facts were undeniable. Marcus's lead attorney, David Chen, tried a different approach in his opening statement. This case isn't about theft. It's about family. Marcus Mackenzie made mistakes, yes, but they were mistakes born of love and concern for an aging mother who was struggling to manage her affairs after her husband's death. The prosecution wants you to see malice where there was only misguided care. It was a sophisticated strategy. Acknowledge the facts but reframe the motivation. Marcus wasn't a criminal. He was a devoted son whose only crime was caring too much. The prosecution's first witness was Jennifer, who testified under immunity about her knowledge of Marcus's financial manipulation. He told me that his mother had given him power of attorney to handle her finances because she was becoming forgetful. Jennifer testified, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. It wasn't until I heard the recordings of our conversations that I realized I'd been helping him cover up theft. Chun cross-examined her aggressively, painting her as a bitter ex-wife trying to destroy her former husband. But Jennifer held her ground, calmly answering each attack while maintaining her testimony. Mr. Chen, I'm not here because I hate Marcus. I'm here because my children need to learn that stealing from family members isn't acceptable, no matter what justification you give it. The bank witnesses were devastating. Managers testified about the forged documents, the suspicious transfers, and Marcus's attempts to explain away discrepancies when questioned. A handwriting expert confirmed that several key signatures were forgeries. In my professional opinion, Mr. Mackenzie employed classic techniques of financial abuse, isolation, gaslighting, and manufacturer dependency. When Mrs. Mackenzie began to question his control, he escalated to intimidation and threats, textbook behavior for this type of domestic abuse. But it was my own testimony that provided the emotional core of the prosecution's case. DA Morrison led me through my story chronologically: Harold's death, my loneliness, Marcus's offer of help, the gradual takeover of my finances, and finally the night he'd screamed at me for asking about my own money. Mrs. Mackenzie, when your son told you, "Don't ever question me, I am a man," how did that make you feel? Terrified, I answered honestly. Not just of him, but of what I'd become. I realized I'd allowed my own son to turn me into a victim in my own life. What did you decide to do about that? I decided to stop being a victim and start being a prosecutor. Chen's cross-examination was brutal, but predictable. He painted me as a vindictive mother who couldn't accept her son's success, a lonely widow who misinterpreted family help as financial abuse, an elderly woman whose memory couldn't be trusted. Mrs. Mackenzie, isn't it true that you agreed to let Marcus manage your finances because you felt overwhelmed after your husband's death? I agreed to temporary help with some paperwork. I never agreed to surrender complete control of my money. But you did sign documents giving him power of attorney, didn't you? I signed documents I was told were temporary arrangements. I never signed documents giving him permanent control over my finances. Are you sure about that? Couldn't your grief have affected your memory of what you signed? Mr. Chun, I may be 74 years old, but I'm not senile. I remember every document I willingly signed, and I remember every document I discovered with my forged signature. So you're saying your son, a licensed attorney, risked his career and freedom to steal money from his mother? I'm saying my son forgot that I raised him to tell the truth, and when he chose lies and theft instead, he had to face the consequences. The moment that broke the defense case came during Marcus's own testimony. Chun had prepared him well. He was contrite, apologetic, claiming his only motivation was protecting his aging mother from financial predators and her own poor judgment. But D.A. Morrison's cross-examination revealed the man I'd seen in my kitchen that terrible morning. Mr. Mackenzie, you testified that you only wanted to protect your mother. Is that why you took out a $200,000 life insurance policy on her without her knowledge? That was financial planning. Estate planning. Whose estate were you planning for, Mr. Mackenzie? Yours or your mother's? The family's financial security. Did you inform your mother that you'd taken out this policy? No, but did you think she might object to you betting $200,000 on her death? Marcus's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen behind the mask of filial concern to the cold calculation underneath. Mr. Mackenzie, when your mother asked about her financial statements, you told her never to question you because you were the man of the family. Do you remember saying that? I was frustrated. I'd been managing everything, trying to help. Were you helping her or helping yourself to her money? I never stole anything. You never forged her signature on legal documents? I had her permission. Which documents specifically gave you permission to forge her signature on other documents? Marcus looked trapped, his eyes darting between his attorney and the jury. She understood that I was handling things. Mr. Mackenzie, yes or no? Did you forge your mother's signature on financial documents? The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Marcus whispered, yes. The courtroom erupted. Marcus's attorney was on his feet objecting, but it was too late. The defendant had just confessed to the core charges against him. During closing arguments, D.A. Morrison was devastating in his summary. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the defendant admit to forging his mother's signature on legal documents. You've seen evidence of unauthorized transfers totaling over $200,000. You've heard recordings where he discusses his crimes with casual indifference. The only question remaining is whether you believe family relationship should excuse criminal behavior. Mrs. Layla Mackenzie trusted her son because that's what mothers do. Marcus Mackenzie exploited that trust because that's what criminals do. Don't let him hide behind family loyalty to escape the consequences of his crimes. Chen's closing was emotional but hollow. He spoke about family loyalty, honest mistakes, and the tragedy of a mother prosecuting her own son. But with Marcus's confession echoing in the air, his words felt desperate rather than persuasive. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood with obvious satisfaction. On the charge of elder financial abuse in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of forgery in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted coercion of an elderly person, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. Marcus collapsed into his chair as if the words were physical blows. Behind him, I heard Jennifer crying. Not for him, but from relief that it was finally over. Judge Harrison's scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, during which time Marcus would remain free on bail. As the courtroom cleared, he turned to look at me one final time. His eyes held no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Only hatred, pure, undiluted hatred for the woman who'd refused to remain his victim. I stared back calmly, the woman who'd been terrified of questioning him about her own money now completely unafraid of his fury. He'd created me through his cruelty, and now he would face what he'd created. The boy I'd raised was gone. The criminal who'd replaced him was about to pay the price. 2 weeks later, I sat in the same courtroom for Marcus's sentencing hearing. The media attention had intensified. My case had become a symbol of elderly empowerment and family accountability that resonated far beyond our personal tragedy. Judge Harrison had received over 200 letters from advocacy groups, other abuse victims, and legal experts urging maximum sentencing. But she'd also received letters from Marcus's former colleagues, character witnesses, and even some family friends asking for mercy. The victim impact statements came first. I'd prepared mine carefully, knowing it might be the last time I ever spoke to my son directly. Your Honor, 9 months ago, I was a lonely widow grateful for any family inclusion, even if it meant surrendering my independence. Marcus exploited that loneliness systematically and without remorse. But his greatest crime wasn't stealing my money. It was stealing my dignity, my autonomy, and my voice. I looked directly at Marcus as I continued. He taught my grandchildren that questioning male authority was disrespectful, that financial abuse was acceptable if you called it family management, and that elderly women existed primarily to fund younger people's lifestyles. I'm not here asking for revenge, Your Honor. I'm asking for accountability. Marcus needs to face consequences that match the seriousness of his crimes, and society needs to understand that family relationship doesn't excuse criminal behavior. Jennifer spoke next, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. Marcus Mackenzie was my husband for 8 years, and the father of my children. I thought I knew him, but the man who would steal from his own mother, forge legal documents, and threaten to have her declared incompetent is a stranger to me. My children deserve to grow up knowing that such behavior has consequences, especially when, it comes from someone you love. Marcus's sentencing statement was a masterpiece of self-pity disguised as remorse. Your Honor, I stand before you a broken man who made terrible mistakes in trying to help my mother. I never intended to hurt her, never meant to betray her trust. I was overwhelmed by family responsibilities and made poor decisions that I'll regret for the rest of my life. I ask for mercy not for myself, but for my children who need their father. I ask for a sentence that allows me to make amends to my mother and rebuild the trust I've destroyed. The statement was polished, calculated, and completely devoid of genuine accountability. He admitted to mistakes and poor decisions, but never to crimes. He expressed regret for consequences, but not for actions. Judge Harrison listened to everything with the patient attention of someone who'd heard every variation of criminal excuse over decades on the bench. When the statements concluded, she addressed the courtroom with obvious gravity. Mr. Mackenzie, you are a licensed attorney who used your legal knowledge to systematically defraud your elderly mother over a period of 6 months. You forged legal documents, made unauthorized financial transfers, and attempted to use the court system itself to cover up your crimes when your victims started fighting back. These weren't mistakes or poor decisions. These were calculated crimes committed against a vulnerable victim who trusted you completely because you were her son. The evidence shows no remorse, only regret at being caught. Your victim impact statement focused entirely on the consequences to your family, not the harm you caused your victim. Even now, you seem to view yourself as the primary victim of your own criminal choices. Marcus's face was white, his hands trembling as he gripped the defense table. Financial elder abuse is a growing epidemic in our society, often perpetrated by family members who believe relationship excuses criminal behavior. This court must send a clear message that such crimes will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, regardless of family dynamics. On the charge of elder financial abuse in the first degree, I sentence you to 6 years in state prison. On the charge of forgery in the first degree, I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, to run consecutively. On the charge of insurance fraud, I sentence you to 2 years in state prison, to run consecutively. On the charge of attempted coercion of an elderly person, I sentence you to 1 year in state prison, to run consecutively. Total sentence: 13 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after serving 8 years. You are also ordered to pay full restitution of $247,000 including interest and court costs, and to surrender your law license permanently. The courtroom erupted. Marcus's attorneys immediately announced their intention to appeal, but Judge Harrison wasn't finished. Mr. Mackenzie, you are also banned from any contact with the victim, Mrs. Layla Mackenzie, for the duration of your sentence and 5 years thereafter. Any violation of this order will result in additional criminal charges. Finally, I am referring this case to the State Bar for immediate disbarment proceedings and to the Attorney General for investigation of other potential victims who may have suffered similar abuse. As the bailiffs led Marcus away in handcuffs, he turned one last time to look at me. The hatred in his eyes was naked, undisguised, frightening in its intensity. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt nothing in response. No fear, no sadness, no regret. The woman who'd been terrified to ask about her own bank statements was gone forever. In her place sat someone Marcus had created through his own cruelty, a prosecutor who'd seen justice done and could finally rest. After the hearing, Patricia and I stood on the courthouse steps as reporters asked questions about the case's implications for elder abuse law and family accountability. Mrs. Mackenzie, do you have any regrets about prosecuting your own son? I regret that it was necessary, I answered carefully. But I don't regret doing what was right for my grandchildren's moral education and society's protection. What do you want other elderly abuse victims to learn from your case? That you're never too old to fight back. That family relationship doesn't excuse criminal behavior. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions, even when, especially when, those people are family. Will you ever forgive Marcus? The question caught me off guard. I thought about the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, and the criminal he'd chosen to be. Forgiveness isn't something you give to people who aren't sorry, I said finally. Marcus isn't sorry for what he did, he's sorry he got caught. Until he accepts responsibility for his crimes instead of making excuses for them, forgiveness isn't possible. What's next for you? I'm going to spend time with my grandchildren, help other elderly abuse victims through advocacy work, and live the independent life Marcus tried to steal from me. I smiled for the first time in months. I'm 74 years old, and I'm just getting started. As we walked away from the courthouse, Patricia squeezed my arm. How do you feel? Free, I said without hesitation. For the first time in a year, completely free. Any doubts about what we did? I thought about Sophie and Tyler, about the lessons they'd learned from watching their grandmother refuse to be victimized. I thought about the other elderly people who might be spared similar abuse because Marcus's case had made headlines. I thought about the woman I'd been versus the woman I'd become. None whatsoever. The war was over. Justice had been served, and the woman who'd been afraid to question her own son about her own money had transformed into someone who would never again be anyone's victim. Marcus had tried to steal my money, my dignity, and my voice. Instead, he'd given me something more valuable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for myself, no matter the cost. The revenge was complete, not through cruelty or vindictiveness, but through truth, accountability, and the simple refusal to remain silent in the face of injustice. 6 months after Marcus's sentencing, I stood in my new kitchen making breakfast for Sophie and Tyler, who were spending their first overnight weekend with me since the trial. The apartment I'd chosen was smaller than Marcus's house, but infinitely more mine. Every piece of furniture chosen by me, every decoration reflecting my taste rather than someone else's control. The children had adjusted better than anyone expected. Sophie, now 10, had asked direct questions about what Daddy did wrong and why he had to go to jail. I'd answered honestly but age-appropriately, emphasizing that people have to face consequences for hurting others, even when those people are family. Tyler, 12 now, and growing into the kind of young man who asked thoughtful questions, had been more complex in his processing. "Grandma Layla," he'd said during one of our weekly phone calls, "I understand that Dad stole your money, and that was wrong. But why couldn't you just forgive him and keep it in the family?" "Tyler, some things are too important for private forgiveness. When someone commits crimes, society needs to know that such behavior has consequences. If I'd forgiven your father quietly, he might have done the same thing to someone else's grandmother." "So, you sent him to jail to protect other people?" "I sent him to jail because that's what the law says should happen to people who commit financial crimes. The protection of others is just one benefit of following the law." He'd thought about that for a while before nodding. "I think I understand. It's like when I have to apologize to the whole class for disrupting everyone, not just to the teacher."
Exactly.
Some actions affect more than just the immediate people involved. Jennifer had remarried 8 months after her divorce was finalized. A kind social worker named David, who treated the children with genuine affection and showed no interest in their family drama. The kids seemed happy, stable, and increasingly comfortable with the new normal of their lives. My phone rang as I finished setting the breakfast table. Detective Santos, calling with an update I'd been expecting. "Mrs. Mackenzie, I wanted to let you know that 3 more families have come forward with similar complaints against Marcus's former law practice. It appears your case opened the floodgates." "What kind of complaints?" "Elderly clients who trusted him with estate planning and discovered unauthorized changes to their documents. Financial powers of attorney that were broader than agreed. One case involving a widow who signed what she thought was a standard will update and discovered Marcus had made himself executor and beneficiary." I felt sick. "How many victims total?" 7 that we know of, representing approximately $800,000 in fraudulent activity. The Attorney General is building a case for a pattern of professional misconduct that could add years to his sentence.
Good.
Other families deserve justice too. There's something else, Mrs. Mackenzie. Marcus's appeal was denied yesterday. His conviction is final, and he'll serve the full sentence unless he's granted parole after 8 years. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table with my morning tea, processing the information. 7 other elderly victims. 7 other families torn apart by Marcus's greed. 7 other sets of grandchildren learning hard lessons about trust and consequences. I thought about the ripple effects of my decision to fight back, not just for my own family, but for all the families who'd been affected by Marcus's crimes. The woman who'd been afraid to ask about her bank statements had helped expose a criminal enterprise that might have continued for years. Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed and ready for our planned trip to the Science Museum. "Grandma, are you okay? You look sad." "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm thinking about responsibility." "What kind of responsibility?" I pulled her onto my lap, marveling at how much she'd grown in the past year, not just physically, but emotionally and morally. Sometimes when we do the right thing, it helps more people than we realized it would. "I found out today that by standing up to your daddy, I also helped some other grandparents who are being hurt the same way." "That's good, right?" "It's very good. But it's also sad that so many people were being hurt." Tyler appeared, drawn by our conversation. "Grandma, do you ever regret what you did to Dad?" The question he'd asked before, but with new weight now that he was older and understood more. Tyler, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your father made choices that hurt so many people. I regret that you and Sophie had to learn these difficult lessons so young. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But I don't regret doing what was right, even though it was hard. Good, he said firmly. I wouldn't want you to let people hurt you just because they're family. Why is that important to you? Because if you didn't stand up for yourself, how would I learn to stand up for myself? Or for Sophie? Or for other people who need help? The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze me. In trying to protect them from the ugliness of their father's crimes, I'd actually given them something more valuable, the knowledge that they could be strong, that they could fight for what was right, that they could refuse to be victims no matter who tried to victimize them. Later that afternoon, as we walked through the Science Museum, Sophie tugged on my sleeve. Grandma, there's something I want to tell you. What's that, sweetheart? I'm proud of you for being brave when Dad was being mean to you. Thank you, Sophie. That means more to me than you know. And I want to be brave like you when I grow up. You already are brave, sweetheart. Every day, just by being kind and honest and standing up for what you think is right. That evening, after the children were asleep in the guest bedroom I'd decorated specifically for their visits, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights. In the distance, I could see the courthouse where justice had been served, the bank where I'd reclaimed my independence, and the neighborhood where Marcus's house still stood, now occupied by strangers after being sold to pay his legal debts. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, I worried it might be Marcus somehow circumventing the restraining order from prison. But the message was from someone else entirely. Mrs. Mackenzie, my name is Ruth Patterson. I read about your case in the newspaper. My son has been taking money from my accounts for 2 years, and I didn't know what to do. Your story gave me courage to call a lawyer. Thank you for showing me that I don't have to be a victim. The police arrested him today. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Another family tore apart by financial abuse. Another grandmother finding the courage to fight back. Another criminal facing consequences for their actions. The scope of what I'd started by asking about my bank statements was still expanding, still creating ripples of accountability and justice throughout the community. The frightened woman who'd been afraid to question her son had become a symbol of elderly empowerment and family accountability. I typed back, Ruth, I'm proud of you for finding your courage. It's never too late to stand up for yourself. If you need resources or support, please don't hesitate to contact me through my attorney, Patricia Williams. You are not alone. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this point. 18 months ago, I'd been a lonely widow grateful for any family inclusion, willing to surrender my independence for the illusion of security. I'd been someone who apologized for asking questions, who accepted financial control as loving care, who believed that family loyalty meant silent endurance of abuse. That woman was gone, transformed by betrayal into someone Marcus had never expected to face, a prosecutor armed with evidence and unshakable resolve. The boy I'd raised had tried to steal my money, my dignity, and my voice. Instead, he'd given me something more valuable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for myself and others, no matter the personal cost. The revenge was complete, not through cruelty or vindictiveness, but through truth, accountability, and the simple refusal to remain silent in the face of injustice. Marcus was in prison where he belonged. Other elderly victims were finding the courage to seek justice. My grandchildren were learning that love sometimes required holding people accountable for their actions. And I was free financially, emotionally, and spiritually free to live the rest of my life on my own terms, as my own person, with my own voice. At 75 years old, I was just beginning to understand what that freedom meant. But I had years ahead to explore it, surrounded by the love of grandchildren who would grow up knowing that their grandmother had taught them the most important lesson of all. You are never too old, too vulnerable, or too scared to fight for what's right. The woman who'd been afraid to question her son about her own money had become someone who would never again be anyone's victim. And that transformation, that was the truest and most satisfying revenge of all. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey of courage, accountability, and justice. If Layla's story resonated with you, please subscribe to her true stories and share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Your support helps us continue bringing these important voices to light. Remember, you are never too old to fight back, never too vulnerable to seek justice, and never too scared to reclaim your own life. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right.